Welcome to the workshop, the SIGGRAPH workshop, Intro to Maya. So, why use Maya? Maya is currently the industry standard software for most jobs relating to 3D animation, especially character animation. So it's been around for a while. So all the old people know how to use it. So unfortunately, you just kind of have to live with that fact. So all the tools and the pipelines that these studios have developed have essentially been built and tested around Maya and the usage of Mel and all that other crap. So, and its interface is geared towards and optimized for modeling, more specifically retopology. It's not that great for like hard surface stuff, but if you're doing like organic modeling, like creatures and characters and all that, it's really good for it. So rigging and animation, particularly, those two definitely. Hello, welcome. So, the strengths and weaknesses of Maya, just to name a few. So, the graph editor, the strengths, the graph editor is relatively easy to work with. If you are familiar with animation at all, you know you are familiar with a graph editor of some variety. Essentially, it is a visualization of, like things that are moving and animated. So it just shows like positions, like time over position, other shit like that. So you can modify that and change how an animation looks and plays back. So rigging is super complicated in Maya, but it has a lot of potential. It's super weird and difficult to get at first. Once you understand the actual pipeline, there's so much you can do with it. There's you can like add your own scripts to rigs and do all these crazy things. There's the connection editor, which allows you to take two values of literally anything and make them match and all that. So there's a lot. There's the quad draw tool, which is beautiful. It allows you to it's pretty much every tool you could imagine when you're actually modeling something in one tool. So it's really nice. I might go over it briefly, but because this is just an introduction, this is not going to be anything specific. I'm not going to go too into it. There's also the scripting interface. It's easy enough for even people who are just starting programming to pretty much get. Even if you're not even really a programmer, you just do it as a side thing. It's pretty easy to, do. So, weaknesses, and Maya has many, but I couldn't fit them all on here. So, many aspects of Maya are cryptic and needlessly complicated, especially the older features that are there's the dope sheet, which is, it's weird. It's very difficult to use. It looks like the UI hasn't been updated since the 90s, so it looks like garbage. So, it has no clean modifier system. If you're familiar with things like Cinema 4D, Blender, those programs where you have a clear modifier stack that is nice and clean and beautiful, Maya doesn't have that. It has modifiers, but it doesn't, it's weird. It's very inconsistent. And then startup times are awfully long. It really is honestly unbearable at larger file sizes. It would take sometimes up to 10 minutes just to open up one file if it's big enough. Or even longer, depending on size and all that. So yeah, so now we're just gonna jump straight into it, right into Maya. I was gonna add more slides, but honestly, it's just best to take a look at it. So here, when you first start up Maya, it's actually gonna look more like this. So this is the Maya classic layout workspace. Over here, you can actually change your workspace layout. So there's all these different ones. There's Maya Standard. They all have somewhat similar. There's sculpting. Don't sculpt in Maya. There's animation. So it just changes your layout based on what you prefer. But we're just gonna stick with classic for now. We're not getting into anything specific. So we'll start with initialization. So when you first start, it's usually good practice to, actually when you're first opening Maya in general, when you first bring it into a new computer, you're going to want to go into your settings. So if you go to up here, every program has this little thing up here where you have the toolbar and all that. So you will want to go into your settings and preferences and change, if you already have something that you're used to, go in there and change it. Personally, I know a lot of people hate it. I do Z up. So you can change your up axis. If I don't know how many of you are familiar with what that actually means, but it's essentially, it's pretty much that. It's essentially which axis it determines to be your forward and your up axis. So if you choose Y up, Z is forward and Y is up, and then if you choose Z, it's the opposite, where Z is up and then Y is forward. I just personally prefer Z just because I started with Blender and Blender had Z, and then Unreal Engine also uses Z up, so I just so happen to like it. You can change your working units. I stick with centimeters, but you can go with meters, you can go in inches, whatever you prefer to do. You know, degrees. Also, oh, and FPS too. FPS is very important. If you're animating, 24 FPS. You can do 30 or 60 or whatever, but it's ugly. It's gross. And I'm not going to explain too much why yet. It's just standard, and it's much easier to work with. So in our animation workshop, if we do one in the future, which we probably will, I'll explain more in detail about that. But we're going to cancel out of that. So next thing you want to consider is your actual project. So if we go to File, set your project, and you're essentially just setting where Maya saves external data when you do certain actions, or like its default like workspace. So let's just say you are exporting out like a skin cache file or something like that. You probably don't know what that means yet, but don't worry about it. Just data that it needs to save as separate files outside of the Maya file, it'll save to this area, this location. So because I hate myself, we're going to set our project to the desktop, and we're going to make a new folder called Cool Project. And now that's going to be our project file. That's going to be our directory. So we set it, and then it's going to ask, you know, it doesn't contain a definition, a workspace.mel file, which it needs to actually define the project file. So we create the default workspace, and now we're good. Now any data that it exports out, it'll put into there. Rendering, like images and crap like that, it'll export into that folder rather than like having to find it inside some weird other Maya folder it makes by default. You'll know where everything is. So we're going to start with, hold on, my scene's a little not in the center. Let me get my notes out real quick. So now that we've pretty much initialized what we want, we're going to start with the UI here. So first, the viewport. As you can see, you know, every program has a viewport and all that crap. So, you know, holding down Alt and, you know, left click, pretty much Alt and then click. Every single kind of click changes how you move the camera. So Alt left click sort of, you know, rotates around. Alt middle click, which is what I've been doing here, is like panning. And then Alt right click is zoom. What's next? All right, so now we're going to go over the top bar. So this little boy over here, this has pretty much everything that you're going to need. In terms of like tools and things like that. There's obviously going to be more specific tools you're going to need, and in that case you would go into this window, but we're not going to go over that just yet. We're just going to go over this right here. So here you have, like different geometry you can make. So you can make, here's all your primitives. So you can, like I just showed, you can make a cube if you want, sphere. Oh, I should probably not be going into shortcuts just yet. I haven't fucking gone over that. So you got, so you got all these different primitives that you can deal with. Then over here you have, you know, like your different modifiers and your operations. So you have combine, which like takes two meshes, puts them into one object. No. It literally just takes two meshes and like turns it into one. I can show it real quick. Or it doesn't actually boolean. It just turns them into the same object. So let's just say we have this circle and this sphere. I'm also going to go over those shortcuts in a moment. So combine them. And now they're just the same object. So in object mode now it's just, yeah. So it doesn't actually boolean or anything like that, but yeah, so the next, so this is just a bunch of tools, like your tool belt. Next is going to be the left toolbar over here. So you have the different selection modes. So here you have just, you know, regular box marquee select. Here you have, you know, lasso, which, you know, most of you are familiar with. There's paint select, where if you have like a bunch of faces on geometry. So hold down right click and you can go into these different modes here. In this select mode, if let's just say we go to face, you can actually paint the faces, and that's how it's just paint select. You can hold down B and then left click to increase the size. Over here, paint the whole face, whatever the hell. Yeah, so that's real neat. And then we actually have, the 3 different, transformation tools. So you have move mode, pretty self-explanatory, you're moving the thing in space. Rotate, rotating, and scale. It's real fun. So, and then the shortcuts for that are Q for, just regular select, W for move, E for rotation, and then R for scale. It's very weird how R is not rotate, but it's just so happens to be the case. It's just because they're all next to each other, and that's the order, so. Yeah, so next up we're going to go over right down here. You see this? These 4 things. These are the different, like, window panel layouts. So this is the default, where it's just, like, one single window. Click here to get the 4-way window thing, where you have, like, your top view, your front view, side view, all that other crap. Even though it all looks the same from every view because it's literally a circle. So we have the 2-panel view, where let's just say you can set these to anything you want, by the way, by holding down spacebar and then holding down left click in Maya.
Hold up.
Yes.
What is this big thing?
This? Okay, so this is essentially every single one of these. You see how you have this little window here, or this little toolbar here, like at the very top? Yeah. So you can change these yourself by going to, clicking on, like, this drop-down menu, and then it'll give you tools based on that specific job. So if you're modeling, you're going to probably stick in modeling. If you're doing, rigging, you'll click on the rigging, and then it'll give you these different, tools here. Animation, same thing over here. So you could do that, or you can hold down spacebar, and you can get them all at once. So as you can see, the mesh tools, like the things that are up here, are also down here. They're reflected. Same thing with down here would be the rigging tools. So if we go to rigging, you can see skeleton, skin, deform, constrain, skeleton, skin, deform, constrain, control. Like, so these, all of them, and then the ones at the very top are the generic ones. So, like file, edit, create, select. So everything that you could find up in here is also found in here. So if you don't feel like moving your mouse all the way up there every single time you want to do something, just hold down spacebar. And in the center is it just says Maya. It's literally just how you change the views if you click on it, if you left click on it. But otherwise, like if you left click on one of the other ones, it gives you the options that you would normally get up there. So we're going to click over here, and then we can change our camera to, let's just say, we don't want front view, we want left view. Well, now it's in left view. And I'm hitting F every time I want to go and focus it, because you'll notice when it starts the camera, like it's in a completely different fucking place. So I just hit F, and it's like it just brings me to whatever I have selected. Or if you don't have anything selected, it brings you to everything. In this case, we only have one object, but if we duplicate this, holding down, hitting Shift D to duplicate, and then moving it. And then we have nothing selected, hit F, and it'll bring you to everything. And it should be, because we're actually just in left view, that's literally all the objects. So we actually move that forward a little bit. Now hit F, and then there you go. Now it's a butt. So, alright, so let's undo all that. Next, and then this, here, let me switch back to single view because I hate that. I never use the dual view, by the way. I think it sucks, but, it's up to you. It's all preference. So this here, this beautiful little thing, I recommend keeping it open at all times. It's the outliner. It shows you all your objects currently in your scene. In this case, we just have P cube 1. It's no longer a cube because we smoothed it out to the point where it's not. But the outliner is wonderful. You can do all kinds of crap with this. If you have multiple objects in the scene, just scale them up a bit so you can actually see them. When it creates them, by the way, they're super small because it creates it in terms of your unit scale. So it's literally making objects like primitives that are 1 by 1 by 1 in terms of scale. In this case, because I use centimeters, it's 1 by 1 by 1 centimeter. So they're just really small by default. So you just have to scale them up. So we can do things like, you know, parent this, like this will be the child of the cone. So now when we click on the cone, the cube comes with it, or the circle. You know what? I don't like the fact that it's called a cube, because it's not a cube anymore. So we're going to rename it by double-clicking, not that, double-clicking, and then calling it a sphere. There you go. Now it's a sphere. You can, and by the way, I parented this, I should mention, I parented this by holding down middle click and dragging, and then just hovering over the object that I want to be the parent. So now this cone is the parent of all three of these objects. Okay, so now we're going to go over the timeline real quick. This just tells you what frame, you know, you're currently on if you were to have an animation in here. So you can like hold down left click and scrub through. Yeah, we don't have any animation, so it's not going to show anything. But if we wanted to have some kind of animation, let's just say key this here, move to a different frame, and then, oh, I should mention, keyframe for the hotkey for keyframing is S. So if you want to add a keyframe, hit S, and then you'll see these little red spots here in the transform values. But yeah, so now if we move across the timeline, you can actually see shit's happening. So that's real neat. We're not going to do that just yet. So you can also change your frame range. So the outer boxes here is your absolute limits. So let's just say I want my limit here to be 0. Like I want to be able to go to the 0th frame. And then for instead of making the absolute frame limit 200, let's increase it to 500. So this is your frame range. So you can grab this and change your frame range. Now, I can click and drag. I go even well beyond 500, or however many frames you need. So, yeah, and then you have all, these are a few keyframe hotkeys. I'm not going to go too far into it. But, yeah, so like this is auto keying, where instead of actually having to hit S, if you move something, it automatically key it when on the frame that you're on. These are the playback options, so you hit here. So notice how fast that went. We're at 24 frames per second. That's way faster than 24. We're going to change that real quick. I want to mention this specifically for anyone who wants to at least start animating, because it sucks. So the time slider by default is set to playing literally every frame physically possible at a certain time. Don't do that. Switch this. This sucks. So 24 frames per second times 1, which will play it actually at 24 frames. Click here. Look at that. It's actually playing it at the proper rate, and it's very nice. So now we're going to save that. All right, what's next here? So we're going to go over the right toolbar, right over here. So I was mentioning this thing earlier, like this weird thing on the right. This is essentially your properties and your transform, values. So we moved this up on the x-axis, 4, and then y, and then, so we have all these different numbers here. You can see when I move it on the z, it changes that value or whatever the hell. So you can find all your transform values in there. There's also this layer thing where you can create layers. You click over here on this little icon, create a new layer. And now we can double click and rename the layer, because you don't want to just call everything like layer 1, layer 2. That's terrible. So let's just call this, I don't know, sphere. We're only going to put our sphere on this layer. Oh, right, yeah. You cannot rename things to things that already exist, even if they're not the same thing, unless they're in a different hierarchy. It's dumb. So let's just call this sphere layer. Oh, and you need to have underscores, not spaces. So sphere layer, because it just doesn't compute spaces. It's dumb. So now we're going to right click here, then add selected objects to this layer. So now we have it on this layer. But what does that even mean? It didn't really do anything in the outliner. You can see here there's these different buttons, right? V for visibility. If we click on it, hides it, shows and hides it. Then we have over here, this is essentially templating something. If we click in that little box, what templating does is it forces it into wireframe, and now you can't click on it at all. That's quite literally all it does. Or If you don't want it to be wireframe, but you still don't want to click it, you hit R for reference only. Now you also can't click it, but now it's at least displayed. So, and then if we toggle that again, now we have full access to it. So that's all good and nice. And you can add as many layers as you want. Next, the modeling toolkit pretty much has everything that you would need for, actually modeling something, like just editing a mesh. So over here, for example, we have that component shifting menu. Remember how earlier I said if you hold down right-click, you can change your modes? So like you have, object mode, edge mode, vertex, face mode. You can also do that in here. So we can also click over here, vertex selection, edge selection, face selection, things like that. And then this is vertex face, or no, this is actually UV, never mind, sorry, where you're editing the UVs. But we're not going over that. Too much shit in one day. So, yeah, so you just have these different like selection options here. There's soft selection, which you can toggle, by the way. If we're selecting vertexes, if you have one selected and you want to move them, but you're like, oh, but now I have to move all of these other ones too if I want to be smooth, right? Nah. Soft select. Hold down B, just like we did earlier with painting select, and then hold down left click to drag out the influence, and then boom. It's cool. It's neat. And then you can hit B again to disable it. Yeah, so then you have, remember all those options over here? You can also find them over here in the modeling toolkit. Real neat. So the attribute editor is right below this. This is essentially like, it's pretty much all the properties of your existing object here in this sort of list. So I'm scrolling up and down to go throughout all these different tabs here. So this is the material it's currently using. This is like one of the modifiers we added. And this is what I was talking about with the modifier system being stupid and nonsensical in Maya, where all the modifiers are here, and you can change like properties of them. So like, let's just say we can increase the division level. I also added 2 polysmooths earlier, so now we have both of them in here. So yeah, and then you also have the sphere properties, or the object properties. I just call them sphere properties, but it's because. Huh?
It adds them on horizontally.
Yeah, it's really weird and awkward and terrible, and I hate it. But if you're looking for an operation, like the properties of an operation that you performed, you look in the attribute editor and you have to scroll around. But here's the problem, right? It also saves all of the things you did. So let's just say I just move this, or like extrude it. So we're going to use our menu up here because I haven't explained. You know what? No. I'm going to explain the extrusion shortcut because it's cool. So hold down shift and then, click in a direction, and then look at that. You've extruded. But you see, now it saved that. So when you are modeling something, it's going to save every single little tiny thing that you did to it, and it's going to add to this. So modifiers are not only like operations, but they're also your history, and it's terrible. So if you're noticing your computer is exploding, the best way to solve that is to use this little nice button over here. Or you can also access it through here. And this button is called Delete by Type History. So you're just deleting the history of it. So now, did you notice how that smoothing thing just disappeared? It deleted those properties. So you can't go back anymore. So here it was earlier. Delete history, it's gone. So it's pretty much set now, like as this. Another important thing to consider is with that, within that same category of deleting and, baking certain things into a certain way, is, how we have all these transform values here and everything like that? Kind of ugly, gross. We have it scaled and translated and all that other crap. If you want this to become the new 0 value, freeze transformations. Every program has a different way of putting it. In Maya, it's called freeze. I know in Blender, it's called apply. Apply transformations, other crap like that. So yeah. All right. Anyway, so we're gonna continue here from the attribute editor. What was our next thing here? So I went over some of the shortcuts. I already mentioned QWER. Very important. pretty much went over all of these. Yeah. So those the shortcuts that I pretty much went over are the essential ones. So like I said, holding down right click, going into the different properties. I won't go over too much what these are. Just know that this right click menu exists, and it changes depending on what you have selected. So if you have nothing selected, it's just gonna either hit complete tool and then bring you back to the selection menu if you have a tool active. And I'm gonna explain what tools are in a minute. Or you can also do select all. But you can, either way. Now we're actually going to go into tools. So a tool is essentially it's pretty much just like a mode. It's like a sort of like some kind of modifying, it's where you're performing some kind of action. I don't know how else to abstractly describe it, so I'm just going to use one, and we're just going to take a look at it. So let's look at mesh tools. Every single like workspace or workflow has a type of tool. So we're going to go over, let's just say the insert edge loop. We want to insert an edge loop. Let's go to that tool. We could just click this, and now we're in the tool. We can click wherever, and it'll add a ton of edge loops because our tool settings are weird. So why is it doing that? We're going to go over mesh tools, insert edge loop, and click that little box. I don't know if you saw that box, but if you click there, then you can actually change the properties. By default, this is actually going to be like this. I just attached it to the window. So we're going to change this to like 3. And then now we only have 3 edge loops instead. Or maybe we just want to add 1 and we want to be able to change it wherever, put it wherever we want. Click on the edge. So we're in this tool. It's a, edge loop tool, whatever the hell. So how do we get out of it? Easiest way to do it, hit Q. And now you're back in select mode. If you want to go, back to it, you can go over here, and just click it, and then add more edge loops if you want. It's like, what if I'm done adding edge loops? I added too many. Hit Q, and then you're good.